Hey YouTube, my name is Georgie and I want to talk about how I got sick from metal implants and specific screws. These are the screws. There we go. So just a quick backstory. I joined the military in 2010 and by 2013 my feet were I had so much pain in my feet, it was unbearable, so I had to get corrective surgery, which is called a bunionectomy. Now, what they do with a bunionectomy is that pretty much like the bones on either like behind your big toe or your little toe are too far out. Your bones are just too wide. And this might be a little bit too much information, but they break the bone and then they fix it in place with screws. And sometimes they shave down the bone just to get rid of like that bump. So I had the surgery in 2013 on my right foot. 5 months later, I had the left foot done. Everything was fine. I healed fine. And with the minor exception that my left foot was actually hurting. The screws were pinching a nerve. And it was very painful, so they removed the screws on my left foot. And the doctor asked me if I wanted to remove the screws from my right foot. I said, well, they're not hurting, they're not bothering me. Is it gonna cause problems? And she's like, no, it shouldn't cause any problems. They're actually designed to stay in. So I was like, okay, I believed her. I went on about my business. And then 2014, when I was separating from the military, I experienced a lot of stress. Just transitioning out of the military and not really knowing what I was gonna do. Just a lot of stress. I started having anxiety attacks. During that time I also gained about 60 pounds in 6 months, which is that's a lot of weight to put on very, very quickly. Not only that, I had never been that heavy. So when I started experiencing a lot of fatigue and a lot of exhaustion and just no energy, I honestly thought it was just because I had gained weight. Then in 2015, by that point, I really was barely functional. I couldn't really work. I couldn't keep a job. I was having episodes of like low blood sugar. My sugar level would just drop, and I was told I had like reactive hypoglycemia. Which is very scary. The first time it happened, I thought I was having a stroke, or my coworker thought I was having a stroke. And so just my health was completely messed up. Aside from the weight gain, I also stopped menstruating. I stopped having periods, and that was 2015. And pretty much that whole year, I did not get a single period. And I was just like, well, it's just stress, the weight gain. That was what I was thinking. I was just really stressed. Then come 2015, around September, I ended up having to move back home with my family. And by that point, I had started working a job for a property management company. Everything was good, and I just still had trouble just functioning in general. But I didn't, I was in denial. I was like, I'm not sick, I'm not sick, I'm not sick. My body was telling me otherwise. My body was just always exhausted, always tired. I never had energy. It was just this fatigue. And so I ended up getting let go from that job. And that summer, I went to school. And as I'm going through school and everything, I was also seeing a doctor at the VA, at the Veteran Affairs Clinic, because, I was like, I don't know, I'm not feeling that well, and I don't know what it is. And I'm thinking maybe they'll be able to let me know. But every time I went in, they said everything looked normal, everything looked fine, and I just trusted because they were doctors. 2016, that's when I got let go of my job, and I did a 15-day fast that summer. While I was in school, I didn't eat for 15 days. And after that, my body felt so good. It felt amazing. Like, I didn't have any of the fatigue. I didn't have any pain in my body, which honestly, I was kind of in denial that I was in that much pain. But once I did that, I realized, wow, like even my rib cage felt like I didn't feel my body was like kind of twisted. And when you're in pain, your body tries to compensate, so it will sometimes come into these very strange positions. And I noticed after that fast, my body, I was like straight, like my rib cage was aligned. And it was a very strange experience. And I was doing okay until about the middle of 2017. I started feeling like that tiredness again. And I was babysitting at that time. And later that year, and still I was in denial. I was like, no, there's nothing wrong with me. I'm fine. I was just telling myself, but I was constantly tired, like wanting to sleep, not do anything. But I kept working, I kept going. Then at the end of 2017, when my niece had her baby, my brother offered me her job, as the front desk for an insurance company. So I took that opportunity. I was like, yeah, sure, awesome. Like, this is my chance to get my life together, to like get my own place. And that was at the end of 2017. I'm going to start going to the gym. I'm going to start working out, getting rid of the extra weight, and just getting things in order. And so in March of 2018, I started taking dietary supplements. These supplements are like metabolism boosters, and that is when everything started going spiral downward. I only took those pills for about a week, and that's when I started noticing, like, I started having night sweats, and I was like, I would wake up drenched in sweat, and I would stop breathing in my sleep, and I was like, okay, that's weird. So I stopped taking the pills. I also noticed that I was having a lot of pain, like in my jaw area, like in this area, on the sides of my neck, the back of my head, like in this back of my head area. My armpits were hurting like crazy. The back of my knees and my abdomen. And also like right here on my inner elbow. This had swelled up a little bit. There was like a bump here that had swelled up, and it hurt on both sides. So I'm like, oh my God, what the heck is this? So I looked up what those things were, why it was hurting, and it was my lymph nodes. They were not really swollen, only the one on my arm, but they were hurting a lot. It was very painful, and so I started having, that was the main thing, just night sweats and a lot of pain in my lymph nodes. So I went to the doctor. I'm like, I don't know what's going on, but this is like really painful. And she's like, started doing all these tests. Now, the test that she had ordered took me about 3 months to get, because with the VA, it takes a while to get an appointment with any specialist. And then sometimes they cancel your appointments and they put you on another list. So it just took forever. So from April until about August, that's when I finished getting all the exams. And then trying to get a follow-up appointment was impossible. So I had to go purchase insurance through my job. And I had to start the process all over again. And the thing with the medical industry is that they have to rule out things before they can test you further. So they were just like, we got to do this and this and this first. And by this point, I was very exhausted. Not only that, the night sweats had persisted. The pain in the lymph nodes persisted for months. It wasn't going away. I looked up, that it shouldn't be swollen or hurting more than a month. And it usually happens when you get a cold or, a fever. That's normal, but it should not persist more than a month. And by this point, it had already been several months, about 3-4 months. So I started becoming desperate. I'm like, this is really bad. This is like uncomfortable. I'm in pain, and all they do is give you painkillers. I'm like, I don't want painkillers. I need to know what's going on. So by the time Thanksgiving came around, that's when I started feeling extremely sick. I remember just not having any energy at all. No energy whatsoever. Everything became very difficult, and it would take so much effort and energy to do anything. And I stopped going to work. because I was feeling so sick. I didn't know what it was. No one told me. I started having chest pain. The chest pain was excruciating, and I actually ended up in the ER 3 times in 2018 because of the chest pain. And when they checked the blood work, they said everything was fine except that my white blood counts were a little elevated. So they always thought, oh, do you have an infection? Do you have a cold? You might have something minor like a cold. And I'm saying, no, I don't have a cold. And it happened every single time I went in there, like, oh, you have an infection. And I was like, well, that's new to me. I haven't heard that even from my doctor. So that's kind of where I started becoming really desperate. I started taking so many painkillers that I actually I think I was overdosing on painkillers. And I'll leave that story for another time because it's something a little too much. But that's when I knew I did something really stupid, and that was really, really way out of character for me. So I knew something was wrong. Like, my body was telling me. This was another thing that was really interesting, was that I could feel people's energy. That's something that I never really had interest in. People always talk about energy and this and that, and just the fact that someone could stand next to me and I could either feel extremely drained or extremely recharged was a sign. Like, my body was so weak. I could literally feel what kind of energy they were producing. And if someone was like impatient or tapping their foot, like when they left, it was as if they drained the very last bit of life I had left in me. And so work was hell. Like, every day was exhausting. And that's why partially I started missing work too. Was just there was just absolutely no energy. Moving was so strenuous, and then the amount of pain I was in, sometimes I couldn't sleep. I would just be up all night crying, like curled up in a little ball from the pain in my back and my chest. At this point, the screws in my foot didn't even cross my mind. Like, all the pain and discomfort was in my upper body. So around January, I went to see a hematologist. And honestly, the way that I've been treated through this whole process is literally like a cash cow. And it's just very upsetting that none of the doctors cared enough. They didn't care enough. The only thing I can say, I literally got so worked up one time I cursed at a doctor. He told me I was completely healthy, and I went off on him. I was just so tired. This had been going on since 2014, that I was having health issues. But the fact that just 2018 was when it got the worst. That's when the symptoms had completely just left me really in a state where I was barely functional and having trouble remembering things. I couldn't even process information. I couldn't learn anything new. Like, it was affecting the way my brain was processing things. So this guy telling me I was healthy, I lost it. And I just started cursing him out. And that's something that I just knew was just extremely out of character for me. That's not like me at all. I don't even like swearing. So this is something I would never wish on anybody. I don't care how evil the person is or how horrible they've treated me, or if they're my worst enemy. I wouldn't wish anyone, not a single soul, to go through what I went through. That was the worst thing I have ever had to experience. I don't know, one day I was just feeling tired. Like, I didn't know what else to do. I spent so much money on doctors. No one could tell me what was wrong. All they kept telling me was that I had an infection somewhere. And I was just on my computer, and something told me to look up breast implants. So I'm like, breast implants? I'm like, okay, sure. I looked up breast implants, and I started watching someone's video about their journey to getting breast implants, or their experience video. And on the recommended bar, there were so many videos one after another, where it said breast implant disease. So I was like, breast implant disease, I'm like, what is that? So I clicked on one of them, and the girl is just telling her story about the symptoms that she was going through, how doctors were treating her, telling her she was crazy. And I'm sitting there like crying, because I'm like, this is exactly what I'm going through. These are the same symptoms I'm having. And she couldn't even tell the story without crying, and I was like in tears, and I'm like, oh my god, this is what I'm going through. Like, it felt nice to know, like, that I wasn't the only one going through something like this, and that it wasn't just in my head, and that I wasn't crazy like these doctors were telling me. And so I started watching video after video after video. Every single time, these girls could not get through the story without crying, and I'm sitting there crying with them. After about 2 days of watching these videos nonstop, I'm thinking, oh my god, could the metal in my foot be doing this to me? Could this metal be making me sick? And that's when I started looking up things about people having reactions to metals in their body. And I kid you not, it was so hard. It was hard to dig up any information about metal making anyone sick. I found a few questions on certain blogs, but it was like very hard to dig up, very hard to look up that information. I did find a video on YouTube where two orthopedic surgeons, one of them made a statement and said, if there's an infection in the body, that infection will not clear until that metal is removed. And when he said it, it's like I saw his face, and it was like, oh man, I said something I shouldn't have. But that little bit was like, okay, it was like little clues that I was getting along the way. And I was like, okay, I might have an answer. And I go to work. I told my manager and my coworkers, I'm like, I think the metal is what's doing this to me. And my manager was like, oh my god, my mother-in-law is going through the same thing. She also had problems with her feet. She had a metal plate, and she had a bone infection, so the metal had to be taken out. And I'm sitting here like, wow, okay, this has to be it. There's no doubt in my mind that it's the metal. And so, but at this point I wasn't like, okay, this is for sure. I was just like, this is a strong suspicion. So I started looking up orthopedic surgeons. I came across one, so I went, and I had to get x-rays done at this particular doctor. And I walk in, and I'm just like, oh man. When the x-ray tech saw me, he was like, oh man, are you okay? You look so sad. I'm like, I looked a hot mess at that time. I was like, I was literally at my end, and he saw it. It was all over my face, and he was like, are you okay? What's going on? So I told him. I started telling him about how I had been sick for several years, and no one can figure out why I'm sick. And so I told him, I was like, I think it might be the metal in my foot that's doing this to me, and this and that. And as I'm explaining to him the symptoms, he's like, wow, it sounds like you were about to go septic. And I'm like, what is septic? And he's like, that's when your body stops processing the waste in your body, and your organs start shutting down. And when he told me that, I was like, wow. So when I felt like I was dying, I mean, it probably was. I was probably dying. My body was so backed up, and my lymph nodes. Oh, and then he started telling me that, oh yeah, that happened to my sister. So he started telling me how his sister had some kind of like bacteria that ate up half her face or the jawbone, so they had to put a metal plate, and she had gotten so sick that she ended up hospitalized several times. So eventually they figured out that it was the metal, so they had to replace the metal with a different type of metal, and then now she's fine. And I was like, oh my god, that's horrible. He's like, oh, she's fine, she makes 6 figures, blah blah blah. I'm like, well, that's good for her, And so I'm like feeling great. I'm like, I just keep getting more and more hints along the way, and I'm like, okay, this has to be it. It has to be what's making me feel so sick. And then I went to the doctor's office, and the doctor was really friendly. He greeted me. He's like, hey, how are you? How's your day going? Da da da. I'm like, I'm doing great. Da da da. So I wanted to just get to the point. I was like, well, I have metal in my foot, and I think it's making me sick, and I need to get it removed. And he's like, immediately his whole demeanor shifted and he started raising his voice. He became very aggressive, and I felt like, I was taken aback. I was like, he was just so friendly a minute ago, but the minute I mentioned that I might be getting sick from the implant, he just started going off on me. He was like, that's impossible. This metal doesn't do that. Da, 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 da. And I'm like, well, it's a foreign object in my body. And he's like, well, people have been putting stuff in their body for thousands of years, and da 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 da. Like, he was just angry, and I'm like, okay, and we had this like back and forth thing going on, but eventually something was just like, you know what, just shut up, because the way that he was reacting, and I just sat there. I let him say whatever he wanted, and I was like, okay, this guy's just trying to bully me just because he's wearing a lab coat and he has a degree. And I'm like, okay, let him sit there and act like a fool and think that he's gonna bully me with his intelligence. I'm like, okay, he's just confirming to me what I had suspected to begin with, because he wouldn't have gotten so aggressive if it weren't true. He gave me a referral to an actual surgeon who does procedures for removals, and I felt so uneasy, and I felt threatened. I felt really scared, because you would never expect to go to a doctor and then be treated that way, to be, talked down to, it was just a very strange situation. And I didn't feel safe. I felt threatened. I felt scared. I never expected to actually experience that. So when I called this other doctor to schedule for a consultation, the first thing that the lady tells me, oh, do you have the original order for the first surgery so we can know who manufactured the screws? And immediately I thought about the doctor. The first thing he tells me is, these screws don't make you sick. It's impossible. And I'm like, talking to this lady on the phone, I'm like, he didn't even know who made the screws. He didn't even know what kind of screws were in my foot. And how is he telling me it's impossible for these screws to make you sick? That guy was full of crap. And I scheduled the appointment. It was like a month and a half out, and I was like feeling like really sick at this point. So I was like, I don't know. I scheduled the appointment and I went back to work, and I ended up getting the number for my manager's mother-in-law's doctor. So I scheduled with them, and they saw me a lot sooner. And I literally went in there. My intention was just to lie and say that it was just really painful and it needed to come out. And the only problem would be the pin in my toe, because this other doctor that yelled at me said I was going to lose my toe. So I'm going in there, I'm like doing, smiling, but inside I felt scared. I was like, at this point, I was freaking out. I was like, I had lost all trust for doctors. I had also been looking up my blood work, anything that was out of range, even if it was just for a little bit. I started doing my own research. I was like, why are my platelet counts high? Why is the inflammation level so high? It was double or triple the limit for the highest. And I was like, my inflammation level was through the roof. My white blood cell counts were elevated, not too high, nothing alarming, but it was all signs of an indication of infection. So I was like, no one can figure it out, so I'm gonna take matters into my own hands. And I went to this doctor. He and then I'm like lying through my teeth. I'm like, my foot is like killing me, and the metal needs to come out. This crap in my toe needs to come out. And actually, he's the one that, when he saw the x-rays, he told me that the device had failed, so it did break. It wasn't even holding my toe the way it should. So it definitely needed to come out, which was good news. But he ended up bringing me in for a second appointment, and I'm like, oh my god, now I have to go through this again, for whatever reason. And he was trying to convince me not to take the pin out of my toe, and I was like, no, it needs to come out, and he literally just kept questioning me until I broke. And I just broke down in his office, and I was like, please don't yell at me. I'm in way too much debt to, from being sick, and not getting answers and not getting told why I'm sick, why I have inflammation, why I have signs of infection. No one's telling me. I'm tired of going to doctors, and I was like, just please, I just know this metal needs to get out of my body. And the first thing I said was just, please don't yell at me, just listen to what I have to say. And I could barely talk. I literally was like choked up so much, to the point that I could barely whisper when I was talking to him. And he was like, I'm really sorry you've had to experience that. I'll take out the metal. I'll try my best not to have to put anything else in. And I'll, everybody's body reacts differently. And I'm sorry you had to go through that. And I was like, man, like, thank God, because I don't know what I would have done if I wasn't able to get that resolved. I don't know if I would be here. Honestly, my body was already in such a state that I couldn't function. I could barely, it was just so hard to move, to do anything. And it took a lot of effort just to get up, and he understood. He scheduled the surgery and then went in. I really was so adamant about not putting anything else in my body, but he convinced me to put a biodegradable device just to hold my toe in place, and that it will dissolve in a year. And I eventually agreed to that, so I was like, okay, at least it will be gone after a year. So then had the surgery. I didn't lose my toe, and 1 week later, exactly 6 or 7 days after I had the screws taken out, I got my period. And I was shocked. I was like, my body wanted to do its thing. Now it wanted to be healthy and natural, have its natural cycles already so quickly. And that was something that really shocked me, because I hadn't had a period in about 9 months, since like September of 2018, and I had the screws taken out April of 2019. So you can imagine, like, my body was already going back to normal, and I couldn't believe it. I was like, wow, how quickly the body responds once you find out what is causing an issue. And so my niece also told me about the documentary that had just been released on Netflix. It's called The Bleeding Edge, and it's a documentary about the medical implant industry. They were just talking about how the regulations for these devices are not strict enough, and they're actually causing people harm. And I'm so glad I was really high and medicated when I watched that, because I wanted to break the TV from where I was sitting, from everything I had gone through the last 5 years, all the pain and suffering. And this is something that no person deserves to ever go through. And not only that, when doctors start telling you you need to be on anti-anxiety medicine or antidepressants, and they just want to medicate you and not find the root cause, that's when it's concerning, or when they can't figure out what the problem is, but there's obvious signs, like your blood work's not coming back normal, and they're saying, oh no, that's nothing, it's fine, it's not alarming, it's not causing any issues, but you're physically in pain. It's time for you to take matters into your own hands. You are your own advocate, and they can't feel what you feel in your body, and they will not care, because all they're doing is getting paid. There are some doctors that do care, and unfortunately I wish I had met one, but I had to take matters into my own hands at that point. And if these ladies had not shared their stories about how they became ill from getting something that was cosmetic, like breast implants, I don't think I would be here right now. I don't think that I would be where I'm at right now. I honestly don't think I would still be alive. And I'm not trying to sound dramatic, but I really did feel like I was dying. It was an awful experience, like a very slow, torturous death. And no one could help me. No one could figure out what was wrong. And
if this video helps even one person out there just to know that you're not alone, then I did my due diligence in sharing this story, because I could not find a single one on the internet where someone had been affected in the way that I had been affected by a metal implant. And not everyone reacts the way that I did. Some people can have the metal in their body and not have a problem. I just happen to be sensitive to metal, and that's something that I wish I had known before I had gotten that procedure. I would have definitely had that removed had I known it was going to do that to me. So just wanted to share that story. And also I am on the path to health and recovery, not only physically but emotionally and spiritually as well, because this was a very traumatic experience. It took its toll on me emotionally, and so I want to document that. I want to vlog it, go on my health journey with me, and hopefully, this will be a motivation for me to continue to, to recover in every area possible. I'm also going to school right now for audio production, so I will be, I don't know, I just want to vlog parts of my journey. I feel like I got a second chance at life, and I am definitely ready to take this on full force. That's pretty much all for now, and I wish you all the best, and I hope you have a healthy, happy rest of your day. Thanks for watching.